All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up our lecture for chapter 9, dealing with Africa and Islam. All right, arts and language. So, art, culture, music, visual arts, storytelling, these are all major parts of African culture. We already mentioned how music and art played a big role in religion. And they believe that the music that they played, the songs that they sung, the poetry that they recited, that it was a way to communicate, to speak with, or to connect with their ancestral spirits, right? So ancestral worship is still a thing. Um, we see a lot of music and artwork being made for weddings, for funerals, right? For important days in someone's lives. And of course, it's also for entertainment. Artwork had many different uses, including religious ones. For example, they would have these, African masks that would be elaborately decorated. And the idea was that you could wear these masks, especially if you go into battle, and wear these masks to ward off evil spirits. In other parts, we see bronze work, bronze metallurgy, develop extremely, complex form of art. Like here, we see this bronze sculpture, or what we call a bust, of an African king. This would be in Benin, which is in West Africa, and so we see these type of forms of art as well. So it's not just like simplistic, what some of us might consider simplistic art. It was very complex, very advanced for its time, as well. When it comes to storytelling, there's the people we need to recognize are a group called the griots, all right, and we see kind of this role develop in any society in sub-Saharan Africa, where people are going to memorize their history, because throughout sub-Saharan Africa there is no writing system until the arrival of Islam, and therefore there's no historical records. So how do you memorize, your the foundation of your city, or how do you memorize the great kings and chiefs that you had, or the wars that people fought in bravely? Well, a griot is your memory, right? They are the ones who are going to have been told by previous people, previous griots, the events and of their history, through song and through poetry, and then they're gonna memorize it and they're gonna tell everyone, and other people are going to learn from them. So they're kind of like this history book, this kind of like living history book, and that means that history and knowledge and tradition and literature will be passed down orally, not writtenly, not by writing, but through the word of mouth. And even women could have these, or take on the role of griots as well. So they again are the history keepers, the knowledge keepers in sub-Saharan Africa. And some of them still exist to this day. There's still some griots to this day because that's a big part of their tradition and their culture. But we see, of course, there's going to be a decline with the arrival of writing systems brought forth by Muslim merchants. All right, another thing we want to talk about is Swahili. We mentioned already Swahili is a blended language, or we call it synthetic, or not synthetic, a synchronized language, because they're synthesizing, they're blending, they're mixing, they're combining two different languages, right? The Bantu languages spread by the Bantu people during the Bantu migrations is going to be one of them. The other one's going to be Arabic, right? Arabic, of course, being spread by Arabs, Arab merchants who are sailing on the monsoon winds, landing in East Africa on the East Coast, and they are going to spread this language. And even to this day, there's a few countries, modern day time, modern African countries, who are still using Swahili. Right, so here we see a picture of this kind of like new blended family that leads to the blending of languages. Right, so an Arab merchant, sailing on these dhows back here, right, with the lateen sails, that triangular sail. They're gonna come to East Africa. They're gonna settle down. They're gonna have get a wife, get a kid, and the wife and the kid, they're gonna grow up or convert to Islam. Um, the dad may speak Arabic, the mom may speak one of the Bantu languages, and therefore we're gonna see little by little these two are gonna blend together to create Swahili. All right, religion. We mentioned already religion. The diviners, right? These are the kind of like the shaman or the priest claiming a divine unique, magical, supernatural connection with the spirit world. Many times they are going to uh, become advisors to the kings because they claim to, of course, have special knowledge that no one else has. Um, and it was a big part of the ancestral worship, right? So if things in your life are going bad, you will talk to the diviner to see how can how can your ancestors help, or what do you need to do for the ancestors for them to aid you from the spirit world. Also, just to remind you that there is a belief in the creator God is super omniscient, meaning that they know everything, and omnipotent, that it knows, that is all powerful, all knowing God, right? So when the idea of Allah, right, that one monotheistic God from Islam, when that idea starts arriving into sub-Saharan Africa, it kind of connects, right? They say, okay, yeah, we understand that Allah is this like supreme God because we have a creator God already. And therefore, kind of easier. It's like this transition from the traditional African religion into the new incoming religion of Islam, right? And the diviners, again, these priests, these shamans, right? People are going to go to them for advice, for help in life. Now, so even though Islam comes into West Africa and into the Swahili East Coast of Africa, it doesn't completely 100% overtake and replace the traditional practices and religious beliefs in these societies. In fact, what we have is synchronization of Islam and the traditional African beliefs. So, for example, and we see the same exact thing happen with Christianity, by the way. But for example, in Islam, there's no ancestral worship; it doesn't exist, right? Because you're not supposed to worship, pray to your spirits, because or your ancestors. You're only supposed to be praying to Allah, right, 5 times a day. But in sub-Saharan Africa, they still pray to their ancestors, right? They believe that their ancestors living in paradise, living in heaven, living in the afterlife, can help you in your life, in the physical world. So they believe, just like you know just like in the traditional practice, that the ancestors still can help you, the spirit world can help the people in the physical world. Same thing's going to continue, right? So that's not going to go away completely with the arrival of Islam. The belief that there's evil spirits out there in the world that are wanting to do you harm, right? People still believe that. So even though in Islam there's no evil spirits, there's no ghosts or anything like that, there are demons and there's the devil, right? Just like in Christianity, they believe in a demon and the devil. So in Africa, they say, okay, well, it's not spirits anymore; it's the demons and it's the devils that want to do us harm. So how do you protect yourself? Well, they always had the tradition of wearing, amulets and trinkets and necklaces and rings that can protect them from these evil forces. So even though Islam arrives and becomes popular, it does not 100% replace the traditional practices in West Africa and in East Africa. They kind of continue. And people criticize the fact that the more kind of like strict Muslims will criticize the fact that West Africa, East Africa aren't as strict to the teachings of Muhammad, right, to the practices of Islam. Now, one of the most famous critics of African Islam, right, that synchronized religion of African traditions and Islamic religion, is a famous traveler called Ibn Battuta. And Ibn Battuta, he is going to be very critical, right? So he is what we call a Qadi, right? That means he's a religious judge. He's a scholar. He's an educated guy. And he comes from Morocco, which is North Africa, which is, very, very strongly supportive of Islam. And he's going to travel all over the world. He's going to go into Mali, into West Africa. He's going to go, of course, throughout the Middle East. He's going to even go into the Byzantine territories. He's going to go into East Africa. He's going to go to India and even all the way to China. Right? And he lived roughly around the same time as Marco Polo. So Marco Polo is, this famous European guy. But even Battuta, he traveled even further and further and further. For most of his life, he was traveling around the world. And this kind of tells us how a guy who, this Muslim guy speaking Arabic coming out of here, from North Africa, how he's able to travel this whole world, right? This whole world, because this whole world is linked and combined and united through Islam. And wherever he goes, he is going to be disrespected, kind of like tourist, because he's a religious scholar, religious official. Um, so when he wherever he goes, he's gonna be welcomed. And in one of his last voyages, he goes to West Africa. He goes to Mali, and while he's there, he writes, very critically, how the people of West Africa are kind of like, not really following Islam the way it's meant to. And his big criticism is the fact that women are able to walk freely in society without a male chaperone. He thought that this was this horrible, horrible thing, because how is it possible that these Africans are letting women women walk freely? On top of the women aren't even wearing shirts, which was mind-boggling, because they're not even veiled, let alone wearing a shirt, so they're topless. And he can't believe it. How is this common? How is this possible? Right? They're not showing any modesty. They're not showing any, any reservation about their body. So he's going to be very critical. But his journeys and his writings are going to show us an insight of how Islam not only spreads throughout the world, throughout Africa and Asia, and or in Europe as well, Afro-Eurasia, but how they're all kind of united through this new culture, this new religion of Islam. A very big part of Unit 3, right, the post-classical era. All right, so that's it for our video lecture. Thanks for watching.